I told her not to go all the way back to the 39 years, but she hadn't mentioned 1976. You know, I know some of them junior RTC people saying, what? Well, anyway, I'm glad to be here. And I think that if you put those sunglasses on that are on your table, you'll be able to see me in 3D. Today is an interesting day. You know, Admiral Harris, when he gives his speeches, he talks about the fact that when he gets up and speaks, he talks about actually the greatest speech that was ever given was by Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg Address. I think it was total of about 30 minutes. He said, and then there was Caesar who gave a big, long speech, and I guess he was killed by his best friend. So he says he doesn't give long speeches. But what's interesting today is that today is actually the anniversary in 1863 of Abraham Lincoln delivering the Gettysburg Address. So I don't expect you to get as good a speech from me as Abraham Lincoln gave, but it should be hopefully interesting for you. I've been here before, and it's very interesting that they invited me back. I guess I did okay. So I'm going to try and talk to you a little bit today about what we're doing from a Marine Forces Pacific perspective in regards to technology in writ large. But more specifically, I'll talk about communications. I just recently went to Harvard University. People say, no way. But I was at Harvard, and I went to a cyber tech course there. And it was very interesting. I learned an awful lot. I was with a lot of people in the civilian community that have to deal with cybersecurity. And then I also dealt an awful lot with those that deal with cybersecurity policy. And of course, part of my comments today is that at this course was the sort of intersection of policy and technology. And with Moore's Law, you know, the fact that technology is accelerating so quickly, it's almost impossible for policy to keep up with it. But if there's one thing that you take away from this is that we've got to find ways of staying up with technology because policy is lagging terribly behind. But I did pick that up at Harvard University, so when I got back, I talked to my G6, who's sitting over there at the table right now, and said, beware, I now know more than you. Of course, that's not true either. The use of, I want to talk a little bit about the cyber domain first. The use of the cyber force has been woven in many facets of our operations and our ability to defend ourselves, particularly in this new domain. And it's come to the forefront of public debate. You should have seen the dialogue between the FBI and the banking industry. FBI obviously looking for back doors, banking industry saying there's no way you're going to get a back door. Those discussions are ongoing today, and it's publicly being debated, but yet we really haven't come to any conclusion. As a commander, I base my operational decisions on continually evolving an understanding of the operational environment, which relies heavily on our ability to operate in and through the cyber domain. You've heard of the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. We want that loop as tight as possible because we want to be able to operate inside the enemy's OODA loop. The only way we can do that is by making sure that we dominate in the cyber realm. Operational flexibility across all the different mediums available for command and control is a critical requirement for me to do my job. And to that end, my staff at MAR-4 PAC has been working on several endeavors to provide commanders across the Marine Corps the operational flexibility, keyword, foot stomper, they require to win the nation's battles. And I would like to take a moment to provide you with a synopsis of what we're currently working on. First, the Marine Corps Enterprise Network. I have the head of the Marine Corps Enterprise Network here this morning. So if you really want to get this true scoop, talk to him. But the fact is that we are working very diligently at trying to improve that network. The focus of a working group that we put together is to define the requirements for an information environment that best supports Expeditionary Force 21 operations. That is our governing concept of ops in the Marine Corps, Expeditionary Force 21. Expeditionary, another key word. And it fulfills the tenets of the Joint Information Environment. Expeditionary Force 21 is not at odds with the Joint Information Environment, but it does require stronger consideration for flexibility and simplicity. The primary goal was to find a way in which we could extend the Marine Corps Enterprise Network to the warfighter at the tactical edge. That's what Marines need to do, is they need to be able to operate at the tactical edge. The PACOM commander depends on me to make sure that I've got my Marines out there forward quickly, ready to respond to crisis. Historically, the Enterprise Network was seen as simply a garrison network. Tactical units would routinely establish separate ad hoc networks in forward deployed locations, requiring them to then tie into the Enterprise Network via various means. That model doesn't work. Additionally, this model is fraught with other issues, such as how to maintain the same level of cybersecurity and cyber readiness that exists in the garrison environment, as well as how to maintain the continuity of the information when deployed. I'm telling you, I lost, when I left my Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and took 2 MEF to Afghanistan in 2011, everything, my entire network of information, my grandkids' pictures, my good jokes, they're all gone. Sent into the dark side, never to be found again. We can't operate that way. Plus, you always need a couple of good jokes. But this new concept would provide for the continuity of critical information and would allow users to maintain consistency in how they access, share, collaborate, and use that data between the garrison and the tactical environment. This would be done by creating a singular network environment that can be easily echeloned forward and redeployed without the loss of critical information or the need to use multiple email addresses. How many of you have about 10 email addresses? You deploy one time and nobody will ever find you. There would also be an improvement to the cybersecurity posture of our tactical networking systems, allowing us to mitigate vulnerabilities in near real time. Extending the network instead of creating a new one allows for more centralized cyber management and ensures networks' best practices are implemented consistently across the enterprise. In my opinion, deploying the Marine Corps Enterprise Network to the tactical edge will provide that operational flexibility I spoke about earlier by simplifying the means in which we establish networks, enhancing the ways we protect them, and is long, long overdue. Where are we now? Since the Initial Operational Planning Group was established in February, MAR4PAC has formally levied the requirement on my good friend, head of our networks, and we have already made great strides in testing our ability to employ this concept using equipment that exists in today's inventory. In fact, MAR4PAC, in conjunction with Marine Corps Forces Cyber Command and Marine Corps Systems Command, has recently conducted a limited objective experiment this past July to identify what can be done today and then chart a path to deliver it. These efforts have informed key decisions as part of a larger Marine Corps Cyber Task Force, and we are all aware of the horrible lag, as I mentioned, of the policies behind innovation. To get ahead of this, the task force has already begun analyzing current policies and procedures across all facets of the IT world. Additionally, the task force developed recommendations that will drive institutional changes to the ways in which we develop and integrate cyber capabilities. Talk a little bit about living in the cyber world. Our ability to command and control is one of the great strengths of the Corps. Indeed, for all of our U.S. forces, but it is also one of our greatest vulnerabilities, especially in the expeditionary and information environments where we currently operate. One of my greatest concerns for the continued use of cyberspace is how to operate in a degraded or completely denied environment. The potential reality I've described could very well be the environment we operate, particularly here in the Pacific Command. Given the sheer vastness of the area, this is why I was extremely pleased to see this issue as the focal point for Technet this year. My question for all the industry folk is how do we leverage technology moving into the future that will allow us to be mobile in a network paradigm with assured interoperability, not only jointly but also within a secure coalition network, and still allow us to operate in a degraded communications environment? It sounds like I'm asking for everything. I am. It's important that we strive towards it. We need to leverage emerging technologies to enable mobile and distributed operations that I have described in a balanced fashion, especially in our fiscally constrained environment. For example, the F-35 has the most robust communications suite of any fighter aircraft built to date, and probably for a long time to come. It will also be the first fighter to possess a satellite-linked communication capability that integrates beyond line-of-sight communications throughout the spectrum of missions it is tasked to perform. This capability, coupled with its massive sensor array, will make this airframe vital for information dissemination on the battlefield. We are just at the cutting edge of really bringing it to bear. Currently, it is scheduled to arrive in theater in January of 2017. We got 10 coming first, followed by 7 more in June of 17. And this capability will be available to the PACOM commander. We will also expect to have an airborne networking on the move capability that will be integrated into our MV-22 Osprey to enable command and control and provide ISR to mission commanders during long-range operations. Ladies and gentlemen, the Osprey has transformed our capabilities. Just 2 days ago, we sent a division of Ospreys from California to Brazil, one flight, 6,200 miles. We take these two capabilities together, and we've just extended our operational mobility and effectiveness. So what are we doing in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region? Well, we're starting to see a greater demand for Marines and the capabilities that we provide, specifically in our ability to rapidly deploy to the littoral areas across the Asia-Pacific region. Just recently, Marfort BAC, in conjunction with PACOM, conducted the first ever Pacific Amphibious Leadership Symposium, in which 23 partners and allies from across the Pacific Rim gathered together to discuss maritime operations and their impact in the areas of not only traditional combat, but also crisis response and humanitarian assistance. Much like those recently witnessed in Nepal and in Saipan. And we plan to conduct this symposium again in July of this next year, and this time in conjunction with RIMPAC, an exercise in Southern California to further the discussion of maritime capabilities across the Pacific. The demand signal, however, does not always call for large-scale forces with their full complement of command and control capability and equipment. Instead, the requirement is for smaller, more agile forces able to operate independently and, in some cases, able to operate from non-traditional naval platforms. Tall order, but we got to do it. These forces range in size from squads to company-level landing forces and must operate in the joint arena along with various mission partner environments. These new challenges will require the integration of disparate systems operating off common standards, thus ensuring full C4I interoperability with all the stakeholders. This April, in Bala-Ketan 16, I'm taking this concept to the bank. It's going to be the first time that we're doing this, but we're going to be distributed all over the Philippines and testing those communications and testing this process. The Marine Corps is currently fielding technologies such as the PRC-117 Gulf that allows for tethering of tablets and other smart devices that can communicate across multiple portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. And this equipment can be fielded down to the squad level, allowing for greater dispersion and distribution of forces in a given area, yet gives that squad quite a bit of lethality. Older technologies such as high-frequency radios are getting much-needed improvements, such as the ability to push large amounts of data than previously thought possible. I've already spoken of the networking on the move system. This capability has been well received by the operating forces during exercises such as Dawn Blitz, large-scale exercise in Camp Pendleton, and the 1MEFX in 2015. As mentioned, we will be expanding this capability into a multi-platform system that can be installed on internally transportable vehicles and airframes to provide en-route command and control and critical intelligence updates for the ground force maneuvering to the objective area. For some of you who came in the Marine Corps in 1976, which is nobody here, when I got into a helicopter with my platoon and we said we're going into this objective, when I got off that helicopter, it was like 50-50 whether or not I was there where I was supposed to be. This capability will guarantee that not only are you at the right place at the right time, but you have all the downloaded intelligence, the latest information, and you're talking to fire support platforms ready to support you as soon as you get off the helicopter. Transformational. A critical shortfall that remains, however, is our ability to utilize a system similar to NOTAM in a seaborne environment, specifically on non-traditional vessels. The fact is we don't have enough ships to move the forces that we need to move in time of crisis. So we're not sitting around complaining and twiddling our thumbs and saying, woe is me, we don't have enough ships. We're now in the process of employing anything that moves. How we can move people in the Pacific, we're going after it. But we need the capability to communicate. To solve this requires a capability that can be brought with the embarked force, installed and deinstalled by the using unit without the need to be embedded within the ship's systems, and able to operate within the limited bandwidth available to these vessels, these non-traditional vessels, platforms. We know a technical solution is possible. Testing and further development of these capabilities is key, and we are working very closely with the rest of DoD. Recently, we participated with US SOCOM on their testing of NOTAM, Network on the Move capability, for their CV-22 aircraft. All of these systems I have discussed and others provide an incredible amount of flexibility for the warfighter. Flexibility, I believe, is the key to operating in a degraded environment. So where do we go from here? We need to continue to explore technologies and solutions that reduce size, weight, and power requirements on our forces to continually enhance mobility, security, and interoperability with our partners. We need to continue to focus on software-defined capabilities that can be easily reprogrammed as the mission dictates, but yet remain intuitive for the current and future generations of Marines. You ROTC folks. There does not exist as of yet a singular system that can overcome every challenge we face or will face in the future. But it is our ability to work through these challenges with the right balance of technology and doctrine, policy, that will set the stage for our continued success in the years to come. As we look to the future, we are seeing an influx of disruptive technologies. I learned that at Harvard, by the way. That will revolutionize the ways in which we operate in and through cyberspace and will drive decision-making in the operational environment down to the lowest level. Examples of these include big data analytics based on algorithms which allow folks in the intel and cyber communities to sift through overwhelming amounts of data from various sensors and present commanders with actionable intelligence and information to influence decision-making and shrink that OODA loop. The ever-increasing desire for autonomous systems and drones, which are adding to the complexity and, in some cases, vulnerability of our networks, will continue to drive operational capability. Simply put, the Internet of Things is something we will have to wrestle with now and in the future. The DoD's Defense Innovation Initiative was announced in November of 2014. Some of you may know this as part of that third offset strategy, which is being discussed more and more in circles in Washington. A core component of the initiative is the formation of a research and development planning program that will target several promising technology areas, including robotics and systems autonomy, miniaturization, big data, and advanced manufacturing, while also seeking to improve the U.S. military's collaboration with innovative private sector enterprises. All of the USMC efforts that I described will contribute to this initiative. Bottom line, let's not forget that that young 19-year-old infantryman out there on the pointy end of the spear, the missions he will be given and the challenges he will face are great, and they're getting greater at an exponential rate. And it is our collective responsibility to provide him with the very best our country has to offer. The consequences of not doing so are costly beyond measure. Thank you very much. Questions?
Good morning, sir. First question. With the continuous acceleration of technology, how does MAR-4PAC deal with high-fused capability integration with forward-deployed expeditionary forces? And this is a two-parter. How can industry help to shorten that procurement to deployment capability realization?
I guess the best way to answer the first part of that question is that as I've spoken this morning about the acceleration of technology, and I mentioned the fact that it's so important that with that technology we develop the policy that incorporates it correctly. And I think, so we have a lot of homework to do at the headquarters to make sure the policy supports the technology. And I think that's a problem that we have. Something that's very important in this question that I harped on a little bit, but forward deployment of expeditionary forces. This is the only way we're going to be ready for conflict in this world. If we are not forward deployed, then we won't be at the pointy end of the spear. We won't be at the right place at the right time. We will have all our allies and partners folding before we even get here. So we need to be forward deployed. So the integration of forward deployed forces in all kinds of platforms, as I spoke to in the comments this morning, is vitally important. Sometimes we just can't be too fancy either. We got to rely on some of the old favorites like HF. And if that's the way of dealing long-range comms, then that's what we're going to do. We're not going to be enamored by that bright, shiny object all the time. I want, particularly the Marines, to understand that some of those older, reliable technologies are just as good. I don't need an iPhone 6 Plus if you got an iPhone 5S that works. Is there an iPhone S? 5S? Yeah. Right? Okay. Second question. How is MAR-4? Did I answer it?
Sir, how is MAR-4PAC assessing recent Chinese actions in the South China Sea?
We are doing a lot. What's happening in the South China Sea? Interesting, APEC just ended today in the Philippines, and there was no discussion of South China Sea. There was discussion about coming together against terrorism, which obviously has got a lot of attention because of the actions in France. But the South China Sea and what's going on there is very important to understand that this reclamation that the Chinese is doing is obviously for a purpose. And if you look at what's being built on those islands, you have to ask yourself whether or not this is not directly in the face of expanding and extending the first island chain. And if they're doing that, they're obviously doing that so that they can protect their mainland. They're also making a lot of people nervous in that part of the world, particularly Vietnam, particularly the Philippines. And the possibility of miscalculation is serious. And so we need to be present. What's very interesting is that if you have a conversation with the Chinese, which we do, we have a dialogue. And we say, okay, we need to make sure we avoid miscalculation. Well, what do you think is one of the most important aspects of assuring that we don't have miscommunication? Command and control. It's got to be in place. Somebody in the Philippine outpost in one of those islands needs to be able to talk to a commander in the Philippines who's got responsibility to make decisions that are the right decisions and not the wrong decisions. And so the Chinese look to tell us, look, when you're working with your allies and partners, make sure you've got those things in place. Because miscalculation is going to be the biggest problem for the next couple of years out there in the South China Sea. It's a dynamic place. And we're looking at it closely. There isn't a day that goes by that we're not examining the latest and greatest developments. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Could you describe how MAR-4PAC is using forces in Australia to develop coalition capabilities and amphibious skills?
Because of the advancements in a peer competitor and like China. What's happening is a lot of, and because of the growth of these islands and things like that, there's a demand signal among many of our partners and allies for development of amphibious capabilities. The Japanese are probably the most advanced right now in their capabilities. I could probably show you just a bunch of pictures yesterday of Ospreys flying off of the new Japanese amphibious ships. They're LSD capable equivalent type ship. So, and they're growing, and they're getting really good. And the exercise that I mentioned about Dawn Blitz in my comments this morning, big exercise in California where the Japanese came in there and really demonstrated great capability. Probably the Australians are probably just right behind the Japanese in regards to amphibious capabilities. They just purchased 2 new LHD-capable ships from Spain. They're a great capability. They're getting them out, and they're going to start using them here pretty soon. And so they're wanting to learn from us how we manage and operate an amphibious ready group / Marine Expeditionary Unit. And they call it an amphibious ready element. So it's organized, it's operating in Australia. They just recently have done some exercises. And so the hope is that we will continue to use the Australians, the Japanese, etc., in some of the larger amphibious operations that we conduct in the Pacific. We have a presence in Australia. 6 months out of the year, we have a rotational unit that operates there. And the size of that unit is growing. And there's some obstacles that we need to overcome, particularly with agricultural inspection standards that the Australians have. But what we plan on doing is using those forces in Australia, U.S. forces, working alongside the Australian Amphibious Designated Brigade to conduct amphibious operations and theater security cooperation throughout the southern portion of the Pacific. It's a dynamic time. There's a lot of good benefits to having the Australians pursue this capability. And they're bringing the Kiwis in too. So it's a good situation. Okay?
Thank you, sir. We have time for one more question. Could you give any guidance to the young ROTC, JROTC cadets in the audience today?
Yes. Since having been a junior ROTC person myself, the things that you learn from the leadership that you have in the school, things about responsibility and accomplishing the tasks that you've been assigned, all those things are very, very important. And I think, if you take those lessons learned and you apply it as you go off into college or you go into the service or whatever you do, you'll look back at those leaders that you had in your ROTC units and you say, boy, they really knew what they were talking about. So listen to them and listen to the teachers. Listen to what they have to tell you. I think it's the reason why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen and learn. Hoorah? Hoorah? Hoorah! All right. Thank you very much.